Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. If you're just finding the show for the first time this week, welcome. We're so glad you made it. We're glad you're here and you're going to spend some time with us. We love seeing the numbers for the show grow and people reaching out to us and telling us that they found the show and they can't believe there's an all things Charles Band podcast. And, we're here for all of your one-stop shopping Charles Band needs. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, but you can call me George Frankenstein if you'd like.
Okay, I think this is 4 weeks in a row now that we have picked the same exact.
Really?
It's
funny.
Work with.
I didn't think that was going to happen this time, and it's funny because I actually had a different one first, and then I thought I was erring on the side of caution by changing it to George Frankenstein, but I guess not. Anyway, here we are. Who is the other George Frankenstein joining me today?
Well, you can call me by my more formal name, Steve Guntley. And this is a podcast about D by D, unlikely monster friendships, and of course, hot uncles. That's because this is the podcast about Filmonsters, one of the briefest and weirdest footnotes in the entire Full Moon saga. We're talking about Frankenstein Reborn and the Werewolf Reborn, which are two family-friendly attempts at kind of an unofficial Universal Monsters reboot that comprises the entirety of the sublabel. Like, all we're going to talk about, the entire Filmonsters sublabel, will be covered today in less time than most individual movies, just like on their own.
Yeah, if we're covering an entire sublabel here, it would be doing a disservice to be, just the two of us taking it on. So I believe, Steve, you wrangled up a very special guest today. Who's with us here?
Oh, I'm very excited to welcome local Austin actor, writer, comic artist, comedian, and I'm told a decent karaoke singer as well. John Golson is here with us today. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hi, I'm George Frankenstein.
Damn it, we really need to coordinate these
Hive
things.
mind.
Yeah. Welcome, man. We're so excited to have you. I'm gonna say, I think it's fair to guess that you did not fully know what you were getting into when you picked this episode. I kind of pitched having you on the show, gave you a list to look over. You settled on a movie because you liked Frankenstein and wanted to talk about Frankenstein. And I feel like we stumbled into something deeply weird and kind of singular in the entire Full Moon catalog.
Yeah, and we found a Frankenstein movie, maybe one of the few that explores absolutely zero of the themes of the Frankenstein novel. There's no playing God. There's no father and son story. It's just, there's a Frankenstein's monster in it. But
it has more in common with Steel Magnolias than it does the Frankenstein story.
I thought I'd never seen it. And it's funny when it got to the, hi, I'm Anna Frankenstein. Hi, I'm Anna Frankenstein. Hi, I'm George Frankenstein scene. I was like, I've seen this. I thought I hadn't seen it.
Oh, you had seen this before? Okay.
It turned out I had seen it before, and I had completely forgotten about it until that moment.
That's amazing. So, I mean, but you're a big Frankenstein fan in general, which is kind of the idea of why you wanted to come on and talk about this movie.
Yeah, love Frankenstein movies. Love Frankenstein, all the Universal ones, all the Hammer ones. And then I will dip into whatever new Frankenstein I see that comes out. I'll give it a shot. The story really resonates with me.
Yeah.
To get personal about it, I guess, I think it's really how often fathers are willing to be present at the act of creation and then leave their creations behind. And that's the part that to me really resonates. And a big old Frankenstein nerd. As a matter of fact, today we were out getting groceries. They had the Christopher Lee, the fake Mego doll of the Hammer Christopher Lee Frankenstein's monster. And it was on clearance. And I was like, I'm coming home with that. So I'm a big old Frankenstein nerd. And so when I saw the list, nobody had claimed it. And it was like, oh yeah, Frankenstein Reborn.
Well, not only that, it's like, here's this thing I love, and I'm going to get to see it reborn. I can only imagine what's in store for me for this, interpretation of this classic story. And it is, like you said, a little bit bare in terms of some of the themes that it's exploring. It's very much this, and then the movie I'm saying movie in air quotes, that we're going to talk about after this one. I
Yeah.
think there very much was a formula, and it was very much about, and I hate saying this about Charles Band because we say a lot of complimentary things, but I feel like this is one of the times when he's pulling from influences from his childhood and things that he grew up watching, at least in the movie form, maybe not the literary form, but kind of taking only a few of the elements to have it play more like a I don't even know, call this like a WB show. Like,
Weirdly, I think the big influence on this very brief little series is Goosebumps, the
absolutely.
short-lived but very popular Goosebumps TV series, because this feels a little bit like that. It feels a little bit like Are You Afraid of the
I
Dark?
was going to say, you got a smattering of that in there for sure.
These definitely feel like episodes of what's supposed to be a TV show. Each of these movies is 45 minutes long. So yeah, as we started digging into the research, it's like, okay, it would actually make no sense to split these movies up and talk about them on two entirely different episodes. So John very gamely took the silver bullet, if you will, and watched the Werewolf Reborn as well. So we appreciate you adapting to that. Yeah, this is a very weird series that I had a little trouble finding much research on, because there's one short chapter and it came from the video aisle. Charles Band does not mention it at all in his autobiography. But we do know that both of these movies were released on October 20th, 1998. We'll start with the Frankenstein Reborn. This was directed by David DeCoteau, who is here credited as Julian Breen. And it's written by Neil Marshall Stevens, here credited as Benjamin Carr. So, of course, we have double pseudonyms already. And this stars Jason Simmons, Ben Gould, Haven Burton Paschel, Ethan Wilde, George Kalin, and Oana Stefanescu. And no, I did not have a stroke. There was not a problem with the mic there. The actor's name is Jason Simmons with 2 A's. I can't think of a better way to pronounce that. But yeah, I think that's it.
It's just there for
makes
emphasis. You got it right.
He's a very post-grunge Victor Frankenstein. He's very Seattle.
Yeah,
Victor
very much
Frankenstein.
so. Yeah, the greasy hair and everything. Yeah, and so yeah, let's dig into Filmonsters a little bit. We are talking about the entire output that the sublabel had in this episode. Frankenstein Reborn was the first of a proposed 4-movie franchise that was going to be basically like child-friendly remakes, reboots of the kind of Universal Monsters classic stable. So
Steve,
the original,
can I stop you for 1 second?
please.
I think so. You were mentioning that there not being a lot of stuff to research on for these, and that's true, especially when it comes from the sources we were saying. There is, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it. There is a making of documentary on
I did not
YouTube
see
of
that.
these. Yeah, and I believe that Charles Bands mentions that it was proposed 6 scripts to
Oh, there were
start.
6 different scripts to
Yeah,
start?
so I
Okay.
think it was
Yes.
Frankenstein and Werewolf, and then I think it was sort of your normal heavy hitters like your Dracula and
And the Mummy was the
Mummy and
4th.
stuff in there.
Oh.
But there was apparently a 5th and 6th. Go ahead,
Yeah,
John.
it would be the opening credits, right? So the opening
Mhm.
credits had Phantom of the Opera and Hunchback.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the opening credits of both movies, you see the Puppet Master characters like in a graveyard, and the graveyard has, like, you know, a grave for Count Dracula, one for Frankenstein, but there is a grave for Phantom and Hunchback.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
And I've also read in the it came from the video aisle that they wanted this to eventually be like 12 or 13 movies, so they would try and like incorporate Invisible Man and a whole bunch of other different ones as well. So they had some slightly ambitious plans for it, but I feel like the wind just went out of the sails when they started making this movie. These feel very tossed off. They feel very cheap and dirty, even for a full moon production. And it's unclear who exactly they're marketing this to. You know, like all of the advertisements, all of the imagery and the marketing and everything like that indicates that this is for kids. It stars kids, but these are so dour and so serious, and like, am I the only one who picked up on weirdly incestuous themes in both of these movies? Like there's an attraction between the teenage niece and her weird young uncle.
Yeah, as I say, it's the old uncle ravishment fantasy.
Dear God, yeah. I was being made very uncomfortable watching these movies, because it's just it's I don't know what they're trying to go for here.
Well, it seems to me like it's one of those examples of either not really fully knowing exactly what it is you want, or kind of wanting to have your cake and eat it too, because this is, like you said, clearly marketed like it's for kids, starring kids, but it plays often like a weird, like, masterpiece theater. And
Yeah,
it's
kind of.
like, so I don't really know why they wouldn't really appeal to kids, other than the fact that maybe if you were a kid in 1997 and a couple of years ago you saw a few of these actors in Saved by the Bell, the new class, which was what they were from, then you might be like, oh, these are people I relate to, these are people I've seen before. But yeah, aside from that, they're very, like, they're very gray, they're very colorless, um that kind of flies in the face of the poster art, because one of the thoughts I had watching these was, I said, this is an interesting concept. Now, how well this is executed is debatable, but I do like the idea of reintroducing these characters to a younger generation. And I
Yeah.
do think that the posters that accompanied these, and I think I saw a Filmonsters, like a one sheet of what the poster art of the other ones were going to look like too. If I saw these in a magazine on, like one of those racks by the checkout in the grocery store,
Yeah.
and this had been 8 to 10 years earlier, and I was, 8 or 10 years old,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
have been all about this based on the artwork. But then,
Yeah.
like, what
John,
you're
have you
seeing
seen
there, you're not getting that on screen.
John, did you see the posters for these?
Yeah, it's like they're kind of, they've got the day glow lettering, like, what would have been on Goosebumps or Fear Street at the time. Very
Yeah.
garish, colorful, paintings of the monsters. Yeah, they look like the illustrations that were on kids horror novels at the time.
Yeah.
More so than like a VHS cover.
Yeah, exactly. But it is lacking. Like, I do think these are cool images, but they are lacking like the whimsy of a Goosebumps book. Like they are a little more hard edge. And I love this pulp horror art style, but it is sending already kind of a mixed message about what this movie is. And I feel like the movie could never really commit or pick a lane. Yeah. So I will say this for both of these films. I think they use the Romanian
Absolutely.
set very well, or the Romanian setting very well, because these feel pretty authentically Eastern European. They feel kind of like down and dirty, and it feels apt for the stories that they're trying to tell here.
I noticed that Frankenstein used that like digital establishing shot from the later Subspecies movies.
Yeah.
Of that red brick castle. I spotted. I can't remember whether it was like the vampire. What's the one with the diary on the cover?
Vampire Journals.
Vampire Journals. I couldn't remember whether that castle was in Vampire Journals or whether it was a Subspecies like 3 or 4. But I remember that insert shot because I remember how odd it kind of quivers. Like there's a digital quiver to that insert, and it was here too. And I was like, oh yeah, that's that castle from the other movie. Yeah, it's also, the Frankenstein one is also strange in how passive the involvement of the kid is. The werewolf one was a little bit more, from a kid wish fulfillment side, or even from the kid being an active participant in the story. Like the werewolf one was more satisfying in that regard than the Frankenstein one is just like you have this teenage girl who's sort of the audience entry point, but she's kind of an observer. It does allow the film to show Frankenstein's monster in that sympathetic light. The classic Frankenstein of being like, oh, he's misunderstood more than he is like an actual monster. But she's still very passive in the adventure, which I feel like when you see stuff for kids, the kids are active in the story. And to me, there was a disconnect there from maybe the script or Full Moon in regards to what was going on in horror for kids at that time. The character would have been way more involved in the events on screen.
Yeah, I think that's
Absolutely.
exactly right. Yeah, like it does feel weirdly passive and weirdly sort of tossed off in a lot of ways. I do want to back up because we talked a little bit about that opening production stinger for Filmonsters that is just like unedited footage from Puppet Master 2, which is delightful to me. It's just like they just toss that in and let it run. But they do have that lovely little pan of cheap cardboard crosses and everything with Dracula and the Mummy and all of them written on it. You know, that amused me, if nothing else. It's kind of listless, you know. It feels like the opening teaser for a TV show, but like this one doesn't really get me super hyped to watch this, or doesn't make me feel like it's oh, go ahead.
There's something about that too, which is like, if you're sort of assuming that the kids renting this are already into Puppet Master. So would they be interested in something like this? Like, if you have those characters as like your intro, you wouldn't have Freddy Krueger introduce the next episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I don't understand the disconnect between, all right, is the assumption that kids have already dived into the Puppet Master series? Because if so, this would be like a step back, right? Like it
Very
would be like,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, it feels very tame compared to what they've already seen happen in the Puppet Master movies. Like, I know that if I had been a kid at this time and I saw this, I would be far more intrigued by what was going on with these little guys at the beginning than what's happening in the rest of the movie.
Yeah, they would just be like an interesting wraparound segment that would stick in your brain after the fact. Like, you'd be having a conversation 20 years later with someone and just be like, I saw this weird, you know, like Universal Monsters anthology thing when I was a kid. I don't really remember much about what happened, but there was this, they were getting dug up by a bunch of walking puppets, and that part stuck with me. Like, that's definitely, and it just, you know, I couldn't help but smile when I'm like popping it on. So finding this movie was difficult. And I say difficult in the sense of like, yes, it's on the Full Moon streaming app.
Yeah.
But when I pulled it up and I saw it was 45 minutes, I had to remind myself of Filmonsters being a thing. So I saw that it was 45 minutes and I went, I wonder what like weird cut of this is on the Full Moon app. So then I went to Tubi, and sure enough, there's another movie called Frankenstein Reborn from 2005, which is a feature-length film. And then I was super confused because I was like, wait a minute, is this the movie I'm supposed to be watching? Because the one on the Full Moon app is 45 minutes.
And to be clear, IMDb lists the runtime on each of these is like an hour 10, which is not true. Maybe combined.
Is it the only way the person who running their IMDb saw it was with commercials, I guess?
Probably. Yeah.
But I was like, oh man, this is a weird one. And so I told you, we got it all sorted out. And then when it started with, you know, that sequence, I was like, I couldn't help but be like, you know, these are a welcome addition to this. Obviously, I enjoy seeing those characters, but it just felt like kind of a funny way to pad this thing, which is padding it out only to 46 minutes.
Yeah. No, it seems, I don't know. This is the most like TV-like thing that we've watched on this show so far. Like, but I don't think it was ever actually conceived as a TV show. I think it was just meant to emulate like the direct, because, you know, Goosebumps would air the show on Fox and then they would release the videos. You know, they weren't like exclusive to video. It was just like, oh, now you could watch it at home. These are kind of that, just without the TV show accompanying it. But
I would love to see these as like part of a Happy Meal. Like, you go to Burger King and you order a Happy Meal and you get like a Filmonsters VHS tape, like those Ninja Turtle ones that they gave away at one point.
Oh, I got a weird knockoff Igor figure. Yay. I'm going to play with this with my Flintstones car. Remember the little flippy Flintstones car? Whatever reason, that's the Happy Meal toy that sticks out in my mind the most. The Flintstones movie cars. No, I'm thinking of the Tiny Toons cars that flip around. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
there was also a car for the Flintstones. Anyway,
mine is the Ninja Turtles one, but that wasn't I'm pretty sure that wasn't McDonald's. I think that was Burger King.
I think it was
like a Burger King Kids Club thing, and they were a special VHS because it had the like Burger King Kids Club emblem on the side of the VHS. That, and I remember, I feel like it was McDonald's, but we had a set of actual glass, like Peanuts drinking glasses.
Oh, okay.
That we got from one of those too. So listeners, if you remember any of these things, or there's like ones that are blatantly obvious that are slipping our mind at this moment, or you want to just kind of wax nostalgic about, toys you got from kids meals. This is as good an episode as any to do that in, because I don't know how often we're going to get to bring this up.
We used to be a proper country. That's all I'm saying. You know, we used to have Happy Meal toys that we could really hang our hats on. I don't know.
They used to do the promos with the movies too, because I remember getting like a full frame DVD of Mr. Mom with like a Pizza Hut pizza or something like that.
Oh yeah, I remember that happening. Yeah.
I feel like nowadays with the codes, with the digital codes, I'm surprised more food companies aren't, because with like in the early 2000s, I feel like at the very peak of DVD, everybody was throwing movies in with stuff where you could pick from like four older library titles and with your dinner. I think there was a Back to the Future promotion that was done that way, where you could get Back to the Future on DVD. But yeah, I'm surprised they aren't throwing out digital codes for library titles.
They really should. Yeah, like I should be able to buy some shredded wheat and then watch Summersby or something. Like, I don't know, like I should be able to just do that.
Yeah, I love that combination of both of those things. That food item and then that film, like together. It's exactly. It's basically with the blandest food possible, you get Summersby. You know, if you buy like a bottle of hot sauce, I don't know, you get like John Wick or something.
There you go. Yeah, that's a hot saucy movie. Maybe I'll say John Wick 3. That feels like the more brightly colored one. Anyway, we're already off on a crazy tangent already.
Steve, you don't have to apologize. These are 45-minute episodes.
Like I said, there's so little to talk about here, because it's a lot of waiting for the main character to catch up to what we already know as an audience, which is always kind of a tedious ask. There's not really any mystery for us. We know who this guy is and what he's doing, you know, and it's just sitting around waiting for the protagonist to figure it out. Like the friendship with the monster, I felt very unearned, you know, because if she was this perpetually lonely girl, like, you know, that would make a little bit more sense. But she already made friends with the village boy, you know, who's kind of like hanging around all the time. So like, I don't know, it doesn't feel as earned to me.
No, totally. And there was a tagline for these, which was horror masterpieces retooled for fans of all ages. And I think that's kind of a novel premise or mission statement or business model for this, but I think that, like you said, Steve, they don't retool anything. So like, where is it different really, other than taking away all of the emotional beats? It's like, do something vastly different with it then, because like you said, we're watching it and we by the pacing of it and the way that the characters are introduced, you can tell that it's going to follow the most obvious bare bones Frankenstein story. So there isn't really much of an attempt to retool it, other than in saying that you are, for branding and promotional purposes.
Right. Yeah. No, you know, what did we think of the creature design here? I don't know. It felt very early Buffy to me. I don't know. Yeah,
I can see that.
They really still wanted like some handsome features to come through a little bit, but I don't know. It wasn't the worst Frankenstein makeup I've ever seen, but you know, it's not really high end. I don't know. John, do you have a ranking, just out of curiosity, of like best Frankenstein movie, worst Frankenstein movie?
Man, so the worst is probably when the Hammer Frankensteins were coming out, they couldn't do anything that remotely resembled the Universal Frankensteins. Until the Evil of Frankenstein, I think, whatever the third or the one where he's trapped, they're trapped in the ice at the beginning, where he's like the Frankenstein's monsters in like an ice castle. I think that's the third one. Right after Revenge, I think. Yeah. Or it's after Frankenstein creates woman, but that was the first one where they said, okay, we can use the Universal Frankenstein tropes, and the monster they created from that is awful. He has a gigantic square head that looks like it's made out of cardboard. It's terrible. I know a lot of people give Frankenstein the Monster from Hell some grief because he looks kind of ape-like and his mouth doesn't move. But I think he's so weird that it doesn't bother me. Like, he's a very strange looking Frankenstein's monster. But that third or fourth, if I have the time, I can't remember the order. It's whichever. Again, it's the circus one. It's the one with the ice. It's the one with the big square head. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. This one, physicality wise, when he shows up, he's kind of like striking some like dance pose type. He's very lanky, and long arms, long legs, which is, in the book, he's described as being very long and lean and lanky. So I appreciated that. He kind of is a mummy from the neck down, and then has like a Frankenstein head. Yeah, he's like wrapped from the neck down. That removes some of the traditional iconography that you associate with like a Frankenstein design.
There you go.
He's not wearing
retooling it for a new generation. They got it down.
Yeah, exactly. And it grew on me over time. When he's first resurrected, I was like, I wasn't pleased. But a lot of that I think was physicality, because he's all sort of like arms and legs, and he kind of moves like a dancer, but not in a good way.
Yeah.
And then later on, when he's having his scenes that are mostly in close up, I was more comfortable with seeing him in close up. And again, it is very Buffy. It is very 90s TV. It's all forehead and eye sockets.
Then just a really like aggressive green, and like, I think you're right about the dancery nature of him. Like he shouldn't feel as graceful as he does. Frankenstein's monster, famously not a graceful character. So it feels like an odd choice to cast that person. I don't know. I was pretty indifferent to this entire movie, and I feel like the movie shares its own opinion, or shares my opinion of itself. It's a movie that feels like, okay, are we done yet? Can we go to lunch?
It's not interested in anything. Like, that's my deal. Is like, not even thematically, but it's like when you were talking, we were talking a little bit about the plot just a minute ago, and I was like, they don't even give Dr. Frankenstein like a motivation. Like, he's just he's resurrecting a monster because that's what he does in the book, but there's no like specific backstory or character motivation, or I'm trying to conquer death. It's just, this is what he does in his spare time, is work on this side project that his niece finds out about.
Right.
It's just devoid of any motivation. Even her, talking about her, is she lonely? What's her deal? And it's like, oh, she's living somewhere that she doesn't want to live, where there are apparently big plates of bread. I liked the big the big plate with like 9 full loaves of bread in front of her for dinner.
It's just a hearty Eastern European meal. Yeah,
and then a good 2 feet of boom mic dipping down.
That was
Jared was saying, like, you texted me after watching it, and you're like, the boom mic should get like an "and" credit on this. Like, it's so prominent, it's crazy.
I don't, we don't like to rip apart the technical aspects of some of these movies. I mean, I think in our earliest episodes, we were a little bit more hard on the movies in some ways, and we've definitely softened on that of late. And I feel like we don't really point out mistakes of that caliber usually. Like, even if there's some continuity that's royally screwed or whatever it is, we kind of gloss over stuff like that under the guise of like, well, these are low budget productions, so we don't want to spend time focusing on that. Let's focus on what works. I could not get over this boom mic. I've never seen anything like it. The entire mic is in frame.
Yeah.
I've never, my jaw was on the floor watching it. But it just speaks to what you're saying, Steve, about the indifference. Like, I don't think anyone cared to even check. Like, it doesn't seem, I wondered if it had to do with, because right before the entire mic is visible, and when I say the entire mic, like, I am not exaggerating.
You can almost see the guy holding it.
Yeah. There's a slight zoom back, and I wonder if it has something to do with aspect ratio. Like, I wonder if it's somewhere like this was supposed to be.
Speaking of Buffy, when they redid the aspect ratio for those Buffy episodes, or like made them expanded, like you could see crew members and boom mics off to the side. So you could be right about that.
I'm gonna chalk it up to that. It's partially that. I think we might have had a partial boom mic, but I think if we saw this in like crew 4-3 or whatever this was shot in, it might have been out of frame. But for how it is here, it's comically in frame.
Yeah,
like it's like a Naked Gun scene. It's just dipping in and bopping up and dipping back in again. It's like it's got a little hat and cigar, like tipping it to the camera.
Well,
it's front and
Dave
center.
Dakota, very much like Clint Eastwood, is a one-take director. I think they have very similar work ethics in that sense.
Like
They
Ginger
you
Dead
go
Man
in,
2 taught us that.
You hire some people that can do the work, and you just let the camera roll one time, and then you move on.
Were you in focus? It was brilliant.
There you go. Well, let's move on to our second movie. That's called The Werewolf Reborn. That one was also released October 20th, 1998. It's directed by Jeff Burr and once again written by Neil Marshall Stevens as Benjamin Carr. And this one stars Robin Atkin Downes, Ashley Tesoro, Bogdan Canberra, and Len Lesser. And that's the entire credited cast. This marks a return to our show of director Jeff Burr. We talked about him for Puppet Master. Oh, he's going to do Puppet Master 4 and 5. I believe there was another movie of his we talked about. We know him as also the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Stepfather 2, a lot of different movies. We sadly lost Jeff last year at the age of 62. But this movie is interesting.
This is off. Not off topic, but it's a slight tangent, which I think is welcome in an episode like this. But speaking of Jeff Burr, I did recently saw him I was at a Visual Vengeance screening for V8, a shot on video movie called Things, not the Canadian movie Things that you might be thinking it is. It's another one. It's an American shot on video anthology movie. And he shows up in the background as like a detective, like he's just walking around with another cop. And his name came up in the end credits. And I said, Jeff Burr, that can't possibly be the same Jeff Burr. He's like in this throwaway role in this shot on VHS movie. And it was him, which was pretty remarkable. But also, I reappraised Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 recently, a movie that I always thought I strongly disliked. And I actually think it's better than I gave it credit for, and I enjoyed watching it this most recent time. And I think it's an overhated movie in a lot of ways. I think it's better than its reputation. I'm on the record now of saying that.
It's got a very interesting take by Viggo Mortensen. It's got a lot of interesting stuff, and it's better than Next Generation, which is still, I think, the worst Texas Chainsaw movie for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so this movie is also interesting because it is the on-screen acting debut of Robin Atkin Downes. If his name and face aren't familiar, his voice almost certainly should be, because he is one of the most prolific voice actors in the industry. He's got about 450 credits on IMDb. He's basically in every video game and animated TV show of the last 30 years, and most of the time it's just kind of supporting voices, animal noises, things like that. He's kind of an uncredited or sort of an unheralded voice acting talent, I think.
Getting into Welker territory there.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, kind of. He could be the successor to Frank Welker if ever the time should come up. And I just have an interesting question here. How the hell did Uncle Leo end up in this Romanian kids werewolf movie? Len Lesser would have been Seinfeld is still on at this time, or maybe it's just ending, but like he must have been able to book something better than this, right? I mean, Uncle Leo's a standout character. It was the most popular show on TV. I mean, what's going on here? I'm not saying he's not, man. I'm not saying he's not giving it his all, because he is bringing a lot of very weird energy where it just sounds like he's trying to play Uncle Leo as a vampire. Like
he's getting dangerously close to a Borat.
He's way in there, but he's also very heavily like New York accented. Like what you can hear it slipping through.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. He's bringing this weird energy, but it was so distracting to keep seeing him in this movie. I'm just like, do you think he remembers that he made this movie? I mean, yeah, he probably did, because he had to fly to Romania, but still.
Yeah, I would say when they were shooting this must have been probably 97. And I mean, 97 would have been, I think, probably the last season of Seinfeld, either the ending of the second to last season or the start of the last season would have been around that time. And I mean, it was still on top of the world then. So, I mean,
but maybe the filmmakers were just like, look, we have this Romanian police detective character. There's really only one man for this job, you got to get me Len Lesser. You got to get him on the phone. Like it's a strange line to draw, but hey, I appreciate the energy that he's bringing. And overall, I will say I enjoyed this movie a little more than the Frankenstein movie. But I do need to say that this is pretty much the same exact movie. Like the same log lines apply to both of these. It's a young girl goes to Eastern Europe to be in the care of her uncle who is dabbling with supernatural forces. It's the same plot.
Don't go visit your uncle is what I took away from these two movies. Which we
Yeah.
were saying before how there's no no recognizable kind of character or plot beats. And that's the one thing. It's like, I think what they're really saying in this is don't go visit your uncle. Uncles be doing weird stuff. That's what I took away from this.
She befriends a local boy.
Yeah, she befriends a local boy in
Yeah.
this one. Yeah. She kind of befriends the monster. Not really. I don't know. She soothed the beast, at least, or tried to. I don't know. But I think, John, you're right that this character is more proactive in the plot, like has a little bit more to do. It feels like she has a little bit more energy and agency. But I still overall found this thing to be so slow and way too serious. It just feels like somebody took a Moonbeam movie and they just like sucked all the joy out of it. Like you still have the same production values, but you just lose any kind of semblance of fun or whimsy. And even as a horror kid at this age, like I don't know that I would have, like I don't think this would have appealed to me the same way like Are You Afraid of the Dark really appealed to me, because Are You Afraid of the Dark did have like moments that are scary for that age group, but it also always had a sense of fun to it.
Yeah, I think that both of the films miss their target. I don't think that either one of them, I think they're both a little too dull for kids. I think if you're talking about little kids who are the ones reading Goosebumps, it's too boring for them. And if you're talking about preteens, well, they're already interested in real horror. Like they don't need like a Baby Steps horror. They're gonna want to rent whatever the hot. You're gonna rent Scream. They're not gonna rent Werewolf Reborn.
That was exactly what happened with me. I mean, I didn't have this movie on my shelf as far as I can recall, but I avoided this was the phase. This was about the age where I would have been skipping the Goosebumps and looking for Scream or looking for John Carpenter, something like that.
Yeah, and if this is 1998, I mean, I think I saw like Urban Legend and like I know what you did. I still know what you did last summer, like in the theater. So I definitely, I wasn't stopping for the Werewolf Reborn on the shelf.
No,
I kind of just dug this one in a way, though. Was it fun? I don't know that I would describe it as fun. I think I appreciated, and I watched these back to back. And I think with the second one, you talked about it feeling like nobody cared with Frankenstein. And this, I certainly felt like I felt like people cared. Yeah. I certainly think the actors were trying to bring something to it. All three of your mains, the guy playing the werewolf, the teen girl,
Robin Downs,
and Uncle Leo. I think they were all trying to bring something to it, which was more than I could say for Frankenstein, where a lot of the work seemed like paycheck work.
Absolutely.
This felt like people were sort of behind the vision of whatever it was that they were trying to get to the screen, and it's more or less there. Again, it doesn't. I think if there's a big knock from me against it, it's that it doesn't thread the needle in finding its audience. It's too juvenile for adults and it's too dull for kids, and it lives in this weird gray area between it.
That's kind of where I came down on it too. But I do want to give this movie some faint praise. Werewolf transformation sequence, not bad for the budgetary limitations that they had.
And werewolf character design, not bad either. Honestly, once he was transformed. And you know what? I think and there was one thing that I appreciated. Now, we were talking before about how the Frankenstein's monster moved and how he moved kind of like a dancer.
Yeah.
Well, I went recently to see Larry Fessenden's new movie Blackout, which is a werewolf movie. And Alex Hurt, who plays the main character who transforms, there are moments when he's running through the woods or away from a scene, and he's he'll stop and he'll kind of pose, or he'll do these really fluid motions. And I think like where there needs to be that, because it's like the hybrid of a wolf and a man, so it has to run like walk like an animal and like a person kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really easy because you have to make your gestures visible to make it look very silly. Like if you don't do it correctly, it will look incredibly silly. And I think this somehow, despite the budget and what this thing looks like to look at, the werewolf performance and movements aren't that silly. Like
No.
I wasn't laughing at this movie watching it. I was thinking, this part is kind of hard to see, is the most
Yeah.
standard definition thing I've ever watched in my life. But I thought that once the guy was transforming and transformed, I thought the way that he played a transformed werewolf wasn't honestly that bad.
No. And so I did enjoy this. I am going to give my horror hot take. I am largely indifferent towards werewolf stories. There aren't really that many, like even the canonical classics, like I love American Werewolf in London, and
Sure.
The Howling is fine, but like I find it like less meaty than a vampire story, than a Frankenstein story. There's just less. The trope of the man exploring his inner beast and things like that has just been done in other ways and in more interesting ways. And the logistics of being a werewolf are always just kind of annoying to me.
Well,
But
you just have not seen a little movie called An American Werewolf in Paris.
I unfortunately started with that one. That was definitely a case of being a kid in the 90s and watching that movie because Julie Delpy is nude a couple times in it, so that was a big formative moment. But also it's sort of the realization, like, oh wait, there's a prequel to this called An American Werewolf in London, and it turns out that one's a little better.
A little bit.
Just slightly. No disrespect to the film career of Tom Everett Scott. My name I somehow still remember.
Conversely, a lot of disrespect to the film career of John Landis.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, a little bit. More watchable, slightly better acted, a little bit better, a little more energy to it, but I still think this feels rushed and indifferent, or not as indifferent, but it definitely feels rushed. It feels cheap, and it just feels like nobody had any real faith behind the Filmonsters project. I don't know if that was just before or just after seeing it, but it faded away without really any kind of notice. And like I said, barely warrants a footnote. But I think it's really interesting that this feels like one of the most specifically timed reactive trends that Full Moon has done. Full Moon, very reactive company. They're always going to pay attention to what's popular right now because they can turn their movies around quickly. Jumping on the Goosebumps trend, not the Goosebumps books, the Goosebumps TV show is very specific, very locked in this time period, and ultimately probably not the best choice. That's where I come down on it.
I would agree with that. And I think the one thing that I enjoyed more about this one than the Frankenstein Reborn was that this maybe it just has to do with the only transfer of it that's available to watch on streaming.
Yeah.
But it really gave me I had more fun with it than I did with Frankenstein because it managed to kind of bring me back to a time when for a couple of things were happening.
Yeah.
One, that I almost would watch anything without really having an understanding of like budget or production limitations. Like I feel like every kid, and not that I was necessarily a kid anymore when this came out, but it reminded me of similar things that I watched when I was young, where you just kind of assume every TV show and movie is equal.
Yeah.
Like you just accept what you're being shown, and it's like, okay, so this one's got kind of a goofier looking monster, but it's on TV, so it's got some sort of air of legitimacy to it.
Yeah.
And I got a really kind of warm and fuzzy feeling of this was sort of the aesthetic that if I was to find an old home recorded VHS tape in like my parents' house and pop it on and have it be like that time I for some reason recorded an episode of Ghost Rider from
Oh, God,
um
I watched so much Ghost Rider. Oh my God, I was exactly
yeah,
the kind of dorky kid who was into that.
right. It's like that's and you try to watch it now, especially with years now of watching things in HD and 4K, and this is what it would look like.
Yeah.
And so I almost had like this manufactured sense memory of watching a show I taped as a kid. I was just expecting the tracking to go off every once in a while, and then
Right. Yeah.
have it flip to a commercial break or something. Like a Frankenberry or Booberry, cereal commercial in between.
Right.
And that aesthetic really got to me this time.
Yeah.
Like I just kind of took myself and put myself in the situation where this was not actually something that happened, but I manufactured a fake memory of it being 1998 and me recording this on VHS and then watching it a bunch of times to where the tape starts to fade a little bit.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
it
and we
was just a nice kind of like a serotonin release watching it that way.
I mean, we were talking about like it's a pretty good time to be a nerd around our age because like X-Men 97 is out right now, which is also similarly triggering a lot of those nostalgic vibes. I didn't really get them from the Filmonsters movies personally, but I appreciated the attempt and I appreciated kind of looking back at this very specific era.
Well, I'm not sure if you brought that up on purpose, Steve, but Robin Atkin Downs actually does voices on X-Men 97 as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, like I'm saying, like I don't think there's a animated show or a video game he isn't at least a small part of.
Yeah.
Of the last 30 years. It's pretty crazy. That's the kind of career I want to have, is, just be a guy who like grunts in the background of like a Halo game, that'd be great. Do we have any final thoughts to put on to close the casket on Filmonsters?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I
So we'll let
think
John
whenever-
take the floor on this one.
Yeah.
Whenever I watch anything, like I like it when a movie surprises me.
Yeah.
And the surprise here for me in all of this, and probably the reason why I'm kind of gentle on Werewolf Reborn, even though it is what it is. It was an
Yeah.
attempt at a product. I am also not a Wolfman guy.
Yeah.
There are werewolves. There are werewolf films that I like. The ones everybody likes: Ginger Snaps, Dog Soldiers, American Werewolf in London, like
Yep.
all of the main ones. But I don't, and I like werewolves as monsters, but the traditional Wolfman, especially Universal Monsters Wolfman, never quite clicked for me. He's probably my least favorite of the Universal Monsters.
Definitely mine. Yeah.
And so I probably responded more positively to this movie than I anticipated or than it may deserve. Question mark.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
again, it took me off guard that I liked it more than the Frankenstein, because I was primed to love a new Frankenstein. Like I was like, I don't care what the quality is. It's a Frankenstein movie I've never seen, which I thought at the time I have seen it, but I was like, I didn't expect to like Werewolf more. As a matter of fact, is it the second one? Werewolf came after.
They were
this
released the
is kind
same
of, yeah, it's kind of debated.
Okay.
I think it says that it came from the Video Isle book that they started production on Werewolf first.
Okay.
But then they were released on the same day. So I don't know if one's 6 to 8 day shooting schedule was finished before the other one started, but they basically concurrent productions, I believe. But I think if I go think back to what I was reading it came from the Video Isle, I think Werewolf Reborn was being made first or went into production first.
Okay.
Yeah, I think coming out of Frankenstein with lowered expectations helped Werewolf beyond the things that were just plain better in Werewolf. So if anybody's listening and is interested in these, I would certainly say watch them in that order. Go Frankenstein, Werewolf. Don't go Werewolf, Frankenstein.
No. And it is a pretty painless, pretty effortless watch. They're 45 minutes each. So like, yeah, it's kind of about the same,
Yeah, I expected it to be the other way around. Honestly, when Frankenstein Reborn started, I went, okay, this is cheap. This looks, like it could have been an episode of an Are You Afraid of the Dark or a Goosebumps type TV show. I'll go along with it. And then I just found that, it was a really languid pace, and I just
Yeah.
was kind of like, and then when I started Werewolf, the video quality seemed so much worse initially.
Oh, there's
And I was
tracking
just like,
lines at the top of some of the scenes. I love it
There
when you're like
were.
streaming something and there's tracking on the stream.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
was
it's
kind of
crazy.
just
Yeah.
like, it's got to be the last thing you're thinking, like when you're watching some. Well, I kind of actually I like the idea of obviously what the things that we talk about and the things we reference are more, I think, uh, designated for people our age or close to our age and in that range or even older, I would say. They probably skew a little bit older for people who have a lot of love for this full moon stuff. I would love the idea of like someone who's like 18 years old pulling this thing up on streaming and then going, what is that? What's wrong with the screen? What are those lines? Like someone, it's like they've never seen a rotary phone, they've never seen tracking lines on a VHS before. But I was prepared to be like, oh my God, this is going to be worse somehow.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of pleasantly surprised. Again, I think really what saves this one, two things. One, like you mentioned before, Steve, the werewolf transformation and portrayal at the end, I thought is really not bad for a production of this budget and caliber. But also the fact that they have the location to shoot in, because this could there's a time when Full Moon and its sub labels would lose that kind of location.
Yeah.
And in some of those slightly later productions, it really is hindered to one set.
Yeah.
And it's just that the cheapness is felt. I think this kind of gets away with, I mean, we're looking at it as adults and recognizing how much things must have cost and what were cost-cutting measures. And we also have been reading a lot about the company and stuff. But I think you could watch something where it's the same budget, but it's really limited in terms of like sets that they can shoot on. And it just feels so much more cheap when that's the case. This at least felt expansive at times. Like they were having conversations and there was depth of some capacity behind them. Like some of the scenes where the lead character is talking to like the Romani mother and son, and they're actually outside and there's actual trees behind them and a field behind them that you can kind of get a sense of distance from the little Jeep or car they were driving around into the landscape. And now it's obviously not utilized the way it's utilized in subspecies 1, 2, or 3, or even subspecies 4 or the Vampire Journals 2, which John was mentioning before. He wasn't sure which one it is. I'm going to say they probably shot the footage for subspecies 4 because I feel like that's what they would have been shooting at the same time.
Probably.
Vampire Journals came out just before that and much higher production value. No really like digitized looking shots in that one. That's kind of a really pristine looking Full Moon Ted Nicolau movie that looks a lot like subspecies 2 and 3.
Vampire Journals and 4 are the only two subspecies I haven't watched yet, so I'll have to take y'all's word on it. But yeah, that puts the final nail in the coffin for Filmonsters. Frankenstein has been unreborn, and the werewolf has also joined him in his dismal fate. Thank you so much to John Golson for being here. It's always great to have you on and to talk nerdy shit with you. Do you have anything you'd like to tell our listeners about, draw their attention to, anything you'd like to plug?
Oh gosh, I don't have any plugs right now. If people have, I'll name drop the last feature film I was in, which was Blood Relatives on AMC Plus and on Shudder. It came out last year. It's a vampire comedy, so if you want to see me on screen, I'm the scuzzy pawn shop owner in Blood Relatives. And then I work on a comic series called Halloween Man, which is available at globalcomics.com. But it's not my baby. I'm just a work for hire artist on it occasionally.
I can definitely vouch for John's art. I have 2 Golson originals hanging in my apartment that are fantastic.
Amazing.
So yes, amazingly talented John Golson. We're so happy that you could make the time to come on. Jared, where can people find us if they want to find us?
Well, if you like what we do on this show, then jump on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, drop us a 5-star rating and maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined to do so. You can find us on basically all social media by searching the name of the show. You can follow us on Instagram at puppetmasters_Castle Freaks. You can follow me at _Giallo_Jerry or Steve at Minotaur Matador. If you search the words in the name of the show, you will find us also on X, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube. Very easy to find. And like I said, more people have been finding the show, listening to the show, and reaching out to Steve and myself, which is so much fun. We love interacting with people who are finding the show and appreciative that they're getting some people who to talk about these little properties and devote so much time to them. But we are not the only show that Steve devotes his time to. So, Steve, what else would you like to plug while you have the mic?
Absolutely. I have another show called Cinema Arcade. That's cinema and arcade, all is one word. We talk about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those worlds collide. We recently had a fun episode that would have come out a few weeks ago already because of the way our systems align here. But a mutual friend of John and I, Ashley Park, came on to talk about the Da Vinci Code, and it was a deeply unhinged, wacky, goofy, slappy, wine-soaked episode.
Sure.
So we had a lot of fun with that. So definitely check that out, and be sure to check us out next week because we are talking about a movie that has been often requested. I've had a lot of people ask about this movie or ask when we're going to cover this movie, a bit of a cult favorite. Hey everyone, Steve jumping in again. Take a drink if you are playing the home version because we have a change in our schedule. A guest was not able to make it at a scheduled time. So instead we're moving some things around, and instead of our previously planned episode, we still have a treat for you. Don't worry. We are going to be talking about Troll from 1986, the original Troll. Lots and lots to talk about with that movie. A really wild, fun time. So look forward to Troll next week. Thanks, guys.
And John, while you're still here, I've been thinking this the whole time. I'm really wondering because I listened to a podcast series recently about the Universal Monsters. I bought a book about the Universal Monsters I had been sifting through that I was going to read this summer. Given just like the heavy hitters, like people rank their slashers, their Freddys, their Jasons, Michaels, Leatherfaces. We know you're a big Frankenstein fan, but like, how do you rank the other Universal monsters? Like, what's your Universal monsters hierarchy?
There's iconography, there's the films, there's the aesthetics, right? So I can say creature, but creature is all about the creature, right? Like creature's all about that. So movie wise, I end up, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you that like typically my hot takes when it comes to Universal Monsters is that a lot of the second ones are better than the first one.
Oh,
Bride is better than Frankenstein. But the one that drives people nuts is when I say I think Dracula's Daughter is better than Dracula.
I was just going to say that. You just said the second ones are better, and I almost interrupted and said Dracula's Daughter.
Yeah, and I think with the Hammers too. I think Brides of Dracula is better than 57 Dracula. I think Revenge of Frankenstein is better than Horror of Frankenstein. So that's my hot take that probably gets disagreed with the most is that I find a lot of the second ones in the classic Frankenstein, Dracula, those movies is better than the first one. Same with Mummy and Mummy's Hand. Like I think Mummy's Hand is so much fun, and the Mummy is just sort of Dracula. Now it's iconic, and it's iconic for a reason. I'm not discounting that, but it's that's probably my most controversial opinion. I probably go, God, let me think. I mean, if Frankenstein's number one, I have to put Lugosi's Dracula as number two, but specifically Lugosi's. I can't do Carradine as Dracula or Chaney as Dracula. Like they're absolutely terrible. So that takes, guys, you thought you were ending the show, but this is just like
I fucked up. I'm sorry,
Jared.
everyone.
I can't talk about this succinctly. I can't just talk about this succinctly. It's like choosing my children, right? Because it's like, so I can't say Dracula is my number two because it's only one actor is Dracula. You know what? I'm going to make this simple on everybody, and I'm just going to say Creature's my number two because I love, like capital L love, Creature Walks Among Us. I think it's heartbreaking. It literally, the final shot of that movie makes me cry almost every single time. So I'll just say creatures so that the show doesn't go for another hour.
Perfect. Yeah.
Well, I thought you were going to echo my take, which is that the only Dracula that I recognize is George Hamilton, because I like a tan Dracula.
Gerard Butler or none. All right.
Well, he has
Dracula 2000 all the way.
That was maybe the first Dracula movie I ever saw was Love at First Bite.
Oh wow!
I feel like that's probably true of a lot
George
of people.
Hamilton's responsible for my first Dracula movie and my first Zorro movie, both. What's funny about Zorro the Gay Blade, just on another tangent, is that at the time when I was a kid, there was a Zorro cartoon. So like Filmation had a Zorro cartoon on Saturday mornings, and then the Zorro movie is like a Mel Brooks style, like parody about a flamboyantly, questionably gay Zorro. Anyways,
this is a whole can of worms. John, we're gonna have you back to continue this conversation
for the entire George Hamilton canon. Yeah, we'll talk those
that's
two.
Our page.
Why don't we start a podcast? Why don't we just start a George Hamilton podcast and just explore all the George Hamilton films?
There we go. Let's do it.
On a scale of 1 to 10.
1 to 10.
On a scale of 1 to 2.
There's the title.
Perfect.
The scale of 1 to 10. Oh my God, I love it so much.
Lord.
Listeners, I hope that you loved this episode. Yeah, we can. We got to end it now because we're not gonna reach those highs again. So thank you so much for joining us today. Tune in next week for the Empire Classic Eliminators. See you then.